All right, good morning, everyone. Today is Wednesday, the 29th of March. It is day 54. And as we said in here, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go over the pretest, and I'm going to create the JavaScript portion of each problem from scratch. Tomorrow will be the actual test. It has been written. I'm saying this now, of course, this is one of those things it's much easier for me to say than you know, you, you know, when people say, well, that's easy for you to say, but I think the problems that we're going to go over now are harder than what's on the test tomorrow. All right. There's one little caveat to that, and I'll mention it at the end of class. All right. Friday will be a lab day with no taping done. I'm hoping that next week, and remember now, next week we only meet 4 days, Monday through Thursday. We're off for Good Friday on the 7th. So I don't know. We may do 2 chapters on Monday and 2 on Tuesday. That's kind of what I'm looking at right now. Then on Wednesday, we would do some of the problems that we have been doing at the end of the chapter, um, the homework and the lab problems as a class. And Thursday, I'd probably give you a pretest. We'd go over the pretest then the following week and have the test the following week. But we'll see how that all goes. Okay, please remember that your chapter 6 and 7 written tests, labs, and homework. And again, we did most of the labs and homework together. That is due by midnight on Sunday. And the chapters 8 through 11, which we haven't even gone over yet, will be due by midnight 2 weeks from Sunday. All right, so with that said, let's get started. I have brought both of these up, but just so you see the JavaScript in each one, I just put the comment in there and the use strict and the alias, that's what's in that one. And same thing with the other one. All right. So right now, what I can do, CAN, what I can do here, try that again, is I can go and run this, but absolutely nothing happens when I click on any of the buttons. So here's the guessing game, and nothing happens when I click any of the buttons. And here's the BMI, and nothing happens when I click any of the buttons. Now, these are what I gave you yesterday to get started with. Okay, so let's get going on this then. All right, so it doesn't really matter which one we do first, I guess, but I think I'm going to do the BMI one because it was listed first. So that's the only reason. Try it again. There we go. So here it is. I'm not going to read these. You hopefully have the test with you or around. All right. But again, I did give you the red asterisk already. So there's nothing really you had to do in there. All right. So I'm just going to start writing code. Again, that use strict is something you should just get used to. It does, in the end, it makes you a better programmer, in my opinion. All right, there's the alias again. Now, just so you know, the reason I keep bringing that up is next week when we go in and we start working with jQuery, the $ is going to be used differently. Not to confuse you, but it's just something to keep in mind that right now we're using it in one way. That does not necessarily mean it's the only way that you'll want to use it. All right. So the first thing we'll do is to declare and initialize our program constants. And I've got, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 of them, but I've got the min height, which is equal to 12. I've got the max height, and I know we did a lot of these last time, and that's equal to 96. We've got a min weight, and that was equal to 1, and a max weight, which was equal to 777. And I also mentioned, I know I've said this before, but I'm just trying to be complete here. Remember the cutoff, so to speak. So if you've got a BMI that's less than 18.5, you're underweight. If you've got a BMI that's greater than or equal to 18.5, but is less than 25, your optimal weight. If you have a BMI that is greater than or equal to 25, but less than 30, you're overweight. And if you have a BMI over 30, you're obese. So I created three constants for this. I've got the first one that I called min over. All right. In fact, that's the second one. Min optimal. And I set that equal to 18.5. All right. And again, so anything that is under 18.5 is going to be underweight. All right, then another one that I called min over, and that is equal to 25. I just made it 25.0, it doesn't matter. So anything 25 .0 or over is overweight. And then finally, one last one that's called min obese, and that is equal to 30.0. So anything over that, you would be obese. All right, and then finally, two more constants here. And these are the ones we were told to put in here, HOOR, and that is equal to height. OOR, we could have just said out of range. I didn't know when people built these. I mean, I gave you this stuff now, so you've got plenty of room for this. But if you built it yourself, you might have a very small area. Normally, I would have written height out of range, or height must be between 12 and 96, and weight must be between 1 and 777, etc. That's normally what I would have done. All right. So those are our program constants. And then I had about a half dozen variables. So again, declare, declare, and initialize our program variables. Like I said, there's about 6 of them. So let's go down here. And I've got that is valid. And I set that equal to true. Again, that is that Boolean flag. I've got a thing that I call the status. And I made that equal to nothing. That is going to end up being our BMI status. So that's going to end up being underweight, overweight, optimal weight, or obese. Let the result equal nothing. We'll get into that in just a bit. Okay, I have this thing here. I called it ELEM, and I believe they use that in the book as well. And that's also, all these are being set equal to the empty string, except for height, which I set equal to 0, and weight, which I again set equal to 0. Now, I'm more than happy to discuss any of those, but hopefully these constants make sense, and hopefully these variables all make sense. And I know I've said this kind of thing to you before many times, but I'm going to say it again, and that is, I am showing you a way to do this. By no means do I ever say, hey, the way I'm showing you, this is the way you should do it. Because like I said, I'm showing you a way of doing it. All right. Now I'm going to skip down. I'm going to leave a little bit of space here. And remember that when we come in here, and let me bring that up, either one of these. So when I run this right now, we have 2 buttons. Nothing happens in this program unless I press this button or I press this button. I mean, I can enter stuff here, I can enter stuff here, but nothing happens programmatically until I click one of the 2 buttons. All right. The reason I'm telling you that is the way I decided to write this was I came down then into the very bottom of the program, and down here on the bottom, I did my document.add event listener for that DOM content loaded. All right, close this. Come on. There you go. And again, doesn't require anything. Just like that. And so I'm going to down here, I'm going to add my event handlers. This is down at the bottom of the program. You can take this event listener that you have right now, you can, C-A-N, you can take that, all right, and put it literally at the top too, all right, and it'll work, all right. I just didn't do it that way. That's all. All right. And the buttons, the first one was called calculate. All right. And my hope is that by now, taking a look at this, I don't know why I'm getting all these unterminated string literal. Probably because of that. There we go. All right. I'm taking for granted now that you all understand that what this line means is when I click something that has an ID of calculate, I want to run a routine that's called calculate. Now, some people would disagree and say, yeah, I get all that, but you really shouldn't have called this and this the same thing. So let's not do that. We haven't written this yet, so let's call this calculate BMI. Maybe that'll make it a little easier to understand. So again, when I click something with this ID, call this routine. You do not put the parens here. That would literally tell it to call it. We don't want to call it. We only want to call it if we click the button. All right, so that's our first event handler. And we're going to add one more here. It's for the other button, which was called clear. Oops. And I called a routine called clear all. All right. Now, there are other ways that this can be written as well. Like I said, this could be put near the top. And sometimes our authors will show it at the top. This can be put at the bottom. I'm just more used to putting it down there. All right. But either way, it'll work. You can get it to work. Let's put it that way. All right. So what I think I'll do first is I'll write the easy one first. Okay. So up above here, right up above, I'm going to put in here const clear all. It will take in no parameters right there. Just like that. Now, again, this could be written in other ways. I'm going to just grab this for right now. And this could have been written as just function, clear all, like that. It would have been fine to do that. That is considered old school, and supposedly, at least, internally, this will run faster. All right. Now, you already know this, or I think you do, but just to be sure, and this is for everybody listening, all right, that if I come back again, let's think about what we want to have happen. Let's think about what we want to have happen when we click this button that says reset form. That's the clear button. All right. Well, I can tell you 4 things that I want to have happen to begin with. In fact, 6 things. I want whatever is in here to clear out. So let's say that was in there. I want that to clear out. I want that to clear out. These, I want to make sure I set back to an asterisk. So that's 4 things. I want whatever is in here to clear out. And I want whatever is in there to clear out. So that's 6 things. All right. In addition, we're told at the end that we want to put a picture down here, and that picture should be associated with whatever their status is. So we want that picture to clear out. So that's a 7th thing. All right. Then we want our focus to go back to there. That's an 8th thing. All right. Finally, we want to make sure that the variables that we have that are holding, the variable that's holding height gets reset to 0. The variable that's holding weight gets set to, or reset to 0. The BMI thing is cleared out, and the status thing is cleared out. So altogether, that is somewhere around a dozen lines that we want to put in here. All right. And I kind of like doing this one first for two reasons. The first, is already mentioned, is that it's easier. But the other one is it's very easy to test once you get it done. Now, the two of those text boxes that are in there, two of the text boxes are disabled. So we can't test those yet, but we can pretty much test everything else. All right. So first thing I want to do is I want to clear the variables out. I can put a comment in there. Clear variables. And I'm going to say weight is equal to 0. Height is equal to 0. And if you remember, I had two other ones, the result, and that'll be equal to 0. And the status, the status, and that will be equal to 0. All right. Now, you may or may not have noticed now, all right, when we look in here, sometimes when you work on this stuff too, and it depends on the editor and a few other things, but sometimes this stuff will be grayed out until you use it, but we are using them in here. So that's the first four things I want to do. And then let's just take it from the top. All right, I want the value for the height. And what is that? Height, oops, if you can spell, dot value. We want that to be cleared out. Then we want well, let's just do the weight next. And the order in which you do these, of course, does not matter at all. All right. In fact, we won't even make it 0. We'll just make it blank. If we made it 0, there'd be a 0 in there for the height and the 0 for the weight. We could do that. All right. I'll just make them blank. All right. And let's set the other things to asterisk. Well, what do we need for that? Well, we need the height, but we're going to be doing some DOM work here, some document object model work here. So I'm going to say height dot next element sibling dot text content, and that's going to be set back equal to an asterisk. All right, and so I don't have to go back and retype. We'll do the same thing with the weight. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right. Well, what else? Well, we want to take that thing that held the BMI, and I believe that's the result. And we want that to be equal to nothing. And the status, which was called status, we want that to be equal to nothing. All right. Just about finished. And remember, I'm sure you all probably do, but what those last two are this right here and this right here. And if I don't remember the names, I can always right mouse click, do a view page source, and go down here, and you'll notice that when I get down here far enough, all right, the status and result. So that's what I just set right there. All right, so now I am up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 lines in here. All right. So what else do I want to do? There's really two more things I want to do. The first is I want to take that picture. And did I put that in here? I don't remember. So I'm going to go to bmi.html. And down on the bottom, down on the very bottom, that's where the picture is going to go, into this div. We could have made it a paragraph or something else. Since it's an image, a div seemed to make the most sense. But right now, weight status picture in an ideal world is going to hold the picture of an underweight person or an optimal weight person or an overweight person or an obese person. So we want to clear that out as well. Now, we don't want to set it equal to nothing. No, we want its text content because it's going into a div. We want to set that equal to nothing. Finally, we want to set the focus to our first field, which is the height. All right, so that's everything I have. Again, I don't know what it is. It must be about a dozen lines. All right. Is there anything in there? You don't even have to answer, Grant, unless there is, but is there anything in there that doesn't make sense?
I just have a quick question on
Sure.
the variables that when we declared and initialized the status and the result, they were empty strings, and here they're zeros. Is that okay in JavaScript?
Oh, and you are correct. I actually, two things. I'm glad I did that. I did it wrong, but I'm glad I did it wrong. And thanks for the question.
All
First of
right.
all, they should be. They should be not have nothing in there. Okay. But to answer your question, JavaScript is special. And what I mean by that is, yes, you can do that. So in your JavaScript program, let me just write this and I'll get rid of it right away. But I can come in here and say this, let age equal 21. Then later on in the program, I can say age equals Jeff. I don't get an error for doing that. And the reason for that is because of the fact that they use let in there, or const wouldn't work here, but they use let, and let does not have a variable type associated with it. So a lot of books will actually put down that JavaScript is a variable agnostic language, meaning that you can change what is in there in the type at any time. So even though I screwed up, I'm glad I screwed up because it led to a good question by you. All right. Hopefully I answered that then. So
Yes,
let's
thank
go
you.
in here, and we've now written the clear all. So we need to write the calculate, I think it was calculate BMI. Yep. So let's write that. And I'll put that right up above here. So const calculate BMI. Again, it requires no parameters. And I want to mention one more thing. Now, some of the people in this class already, namely like, let's see, Grant and Chad and James and Andrew, etc. Some of those, I might have missed somebody, I don't know that, you know, last semester when you took the C# class, that C#, unlike JavaScript, is not a variable agnostic language. So in other words, you have to do things in a certain way. If you say, rather than let age equal 21, you would typically say int age equal 21, which means that age has to hold a whole number. If you come in later on and you try to change age to something else that's not an integer, the program blows up. All right. This language, it doesn't do that. And that's why, and I've said this before, that some people say that this is the best first language to learn because when you do something you shouldn't do, the language is typically so forgiving that it lets you get away with it. It's also the worst language for the same reason, because when you go from this language to another language, all right, when you go from this language to another language, one that is much more restrictive, it's kind of hard because you've already learned some bad habits. All right. So, and there's been constant debate over stuff like this. I remember, and hopefully, if you heard this story already, sorry. But growing up, I worked in a food store for a few years, and I became friends with a guy who worked at the same store. We lived in different towns, so we went to different schools, but we became pretty good friends. And he was in a band, and I watched him playing one day, and I mean, he was a really good guitarist. And I asked him, his name was Scott, and I said, Scott, did you ever break a string while you were performing? And he said, yeah, it's actually happened a couple times. I said, well, what did you do? He said, to be honest with you, I just went over and I turned my amp up even more so people really couldn't tell. And I said, wow. And he said, yeah, but he said one time, he said he was playing at a small place and he had an acoustic guitar and he broke a string. And he said everybody could tell. The reason I'm bringing this up is playing with an electric guitar and just turning up your amp is kind of like using JavaScript. because JavaScript in its own way is so forgiving that when you screw up or you forget to do something, typically JavaScript thinks, oh, you meant to do this, you just didn't. All right, and it'll try to do it for you. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, that's not for me to decide. All right, so in here, in our calculate BMI that we have right here, the first thing I want to do is we're doing a bunch of stuff in here where we're using timers. All right, and in your book, they create a timer and they set it equal to null. Now I could try to use the same timer throughout the entire program. I don't like doing that. All right. It would be kind of like, I could probably use the same alarm if I had a whole room full of people, as long as they were waking up at different times. I'd rather get a bunch of alarms and just set each one once. So that's the way I did this. All right. And then we've got our height, and that is equal to parse int of height dot value, and then do the same thing with weight. So again, both those lines, you should all understand this by now. All right. That what line 70 is doing is it's grabbing whatever value we put into that first text box. It's attempting to convert it into a number. So it either will be a number, or it'll have NaN in it. Same thing with weight. All right. Now, last semester, people who had me for C#, a lot of times that I would write things and I would create, I'm going to use is valid right now, but I would do something and I would call it like again or whatever. And that's kind of the same thing here. So I'm going to take is valid and I'm going to set it equal to validate height. And what am I going to do in there? I'm going to pass it in height. What does that mean? All right. Technically, I don't even need to pass it in. By creating these variables right here, they're global. They're global, meaning they're known throughout the entire program. So technically, I don't even need to pass this because it's global. Now, I've gotten to the point where when I'm teaching people, especially people for the first time, there are certain rules that you should be taught to follow. One of those rules that you should be taught to follow is you really shouldn't use global variables if you can help it. All right. So, okay, fine, Jeff, then why are you showing us global variables? Because to me, it's even more important that you learn how to program. All right. Then next semester, we start by, in the C# class, we again make most everything global, but by the end of the semester, we have virtually nothing that's global. All right. So you're learning a lot of stuff in here, maybe not the best way to do things at all times. We could have set it up and we could have taken the height and the weight and put them in here. All right. In fact, let me see at least if I can do it that way. All right. I don't even know if I'm going to get any errors from that. Well, let's see. If I do, then the problem is there's the height and there's the weight right here and here. All right. I'm just going to leave them the way they are. I'm sure we could get it to work, but it would probably make my lecture take another hour. I don't really want to do that. So we're going to validate the height. What does that mean? We want to make sure three things with the height. Number one, it's a number. Number two, it's a number between that's greater than or equal to 12. And number three, it's a number that's less than or equal to 96. All right. The numeric should make sense. The 12 and the 96 are right here. All right. So what I'm going to do quickly, and there's more code that I have to write down here, but I'm going to come down here for right now. And down below this, I'm going to make const validate height. All right. It doesn't need any parameters. And it looks like this. Okay. So what do I want to do here? I'm going to there's different ways of doing this. All right. And I'm going to write it a certain way. It's about 10 or 12 lines, but I'm going to write it and then I'm going to come back and talk about everything that's in here. And the validate weight will be exactly the same, except every H that's in there will have to become a W. And we're going to call the validate weight here in just a second. So I'm going to let something I call retval, which is my return value. In fact, I'm not even returning anything, so I don't need that anymore. All right, I'm going to let timer equal to null. So this is a different timer than the one we did up here. All right, because they're basically allotting for different things. All right, so I'm going to come in here and say if is NaN height or height is less than min height or height is greater than max height. Now, sometimes, and I like to do this myself, people like to break these up over multiple lines. Makes it a little bit easier to read, and I'm even a little quirky about that. So if that makes it easier for you to read, do it like that. If that makes it harder for you to understand, then don't do it like that. Now, if it is one of these things, we want three things to happen. All right. If it's either not numeric, or if it's less than 12, or if it's greater than 96, we want three different things to happen. That means, for example, if we left that blank, we want to change this so it's not an asterisk anymore. It says height OOR. That's the first thing. All right. Well, we know that it's false because we're calling this validate heights. The height wasn't valid, so we want to set that to false. Finally, we want that, basically, we want to clear everything out after 5 seconds. So we're going to work with that timer. And if you don't get what I mean, let's just put them in. So the first thing is, that's going to change that to HOOR, height out of range. All right. Next, I'm going to set that timer. And what this means is I'm going to tell it right now that call clear all, but before you call clear all, wait 5 seconds. Finally, again, because this is invalid, we want to say retval, which is, we're not using a return value. Yeah, we are. So retval, we want to make that equal to false. And I do need to set retval up here. So we're going to assume that it's true. And all I'm saying here is this is just what we're going to return. We're going to return true or false. Why? Because we're stuffing it into a variable that's a Boolean variable that's either going to be true or it's going to be false. All right. So if we set in something that was out of range, we're setting it equal to false. All right. And we're changing that asterisk to the word HOOR, and we should wait 5 seconds and then call our clear all. All right. Now we need an else in here. So we don't have to, but we can put a comment right here, because if this is the case, bad height. And what do I mean by bad height? Exactly what I just told you. Either it was non-numeric, or, all right, or it was out of range. And this will be good height. So if it's a good height, what do I want to do? Well, I want to remove this. In other words, I don't want it to be an asterisk. I don't want it to be something that has height OOR. I want it to be equal to nothing. All right. And then finally, I just want to return my retval. All right. So we're coming in here and we're saying set this timer to nothing. All right. Our height should be whatever was in the first text box. Our weight was whatever was in the second text box. But we want to validate that. All right, just from what we have right now. So let me do a file, try to do a file save all. And let me go back to bmi.html here. All right, and I'm going to leave it blank. Height OOR 2, 3, 4, 5, and it cleared. All right, and it did that in that case if I left it blank, or if I can't put anything non-numeric in because I set this to type number. But remember, it's the height range is between 12 and 96. So I'll put 11 here. And again, I get height out of range. It'll wait 5 seconds and it'll clear. If I put 97, which is one more than we're allowed, again, height out of range, wait 5 seconds, clear, and put the focus back there. So that all appears to work. All right, that's good. That's a good start. Now, in just a moment, we're going to write validate weight. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab everything I have here from validate height. Now, I wouldn't normally do this, all right, but it's not that I'm pressed for time, but I also don't think you should have to go through watching me type. So starting on line 95, I get the error because there already is a validate height. So I'm going to make that validate weight. This is all okay, but all these heights are going to now have to become weights. The problem with doing what I'm doing right here is if you forget to change one or two of them, all right, those are logic errors when we talked about those back in chapter 5. All right, so otherwise we've got a good weight. Okay, that should be everything. Let me double check. Validate weight instead of height. Weight, 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 weight. That'll give us an error. And weight, weight. All right, that's done. Now we're not calling it yet. That's okay. All right. Now, when we come here, this is either going to return true or false. You've already seen that. It's going to return true or false. If it returns true, I put a valid height in there. What does that mean? That means that I can now check the weight. All right. So let me come in here, and because it's a good idea, let's just say here, validate height. All right. And now we're going to come down here and we're going to say if is valid. Now remember, that's a shortcut. That's the same thing as saying if is valid equal true. They mean exactly the same thing, but as you can see, the first one results in a lot less typing. So if is valid, that means we put in a valid weight. So now we can say is valid equals validate weight. So now we can call that routine we just wrote. All right. Well, what about this? Else. What does that mean? That means that this returned false. So it means either we left it blank, or we put in a number that was less than 12, or we put in a number that was greater than 96. Regardless of which of those three it is, we don't want to do anything else here. So we will just return. So now we should be able to go in and make the same change, or the same checks, I should say, on validating our weight. So again, let me do a file save all here. Let me bring this up and run it. So you've already seen this. If I leave it blank, that's height OOR, and boom, it'll go back in and it'll clear itself out. But if I put this in now, I get weight OOR. Now, notice what happens. It does clear them both out. Okay, we could have checked right there and left because one of them is probably valid. All right, So we could have checked that. But it's okay. It's not that big a thing. But again, if I come through here, same kind of way, you already saw this. So if I put in a 72, you saw when I left it blank, it said weight out of range. And our baseline in here is the smallest weight is 1. So if I put in 0, again, I get weight OOR. And the largest weight that we were allowing was 777. So let's put in 778. And again, we get those errors. So it appears, at least, it appears as though everything that's in here is working. Everything we've done thus far appears to be working. Now, what does that mean? That means if we get down to here, so we checked right here, and we checked for a valid height. All right. And now we're coming in here and we're trying to validate the weight. So if we get down to here, we're going to check again to see if it's still valid. So if is valid. Now, what that means is, in this case, we put in a valid height and we put in a valid weight. I want to say that again. We put in a valid height and we put in a valid weight. So height was valid, weight was valid. We'll do something there in just a minute. I'm going to put some code in there, a few lines in just a minute. But for the else, what does that mean? Well, it means we had an invalid weight. So again, we just want to return. That's it. All right. Now, what do we want to do since the height was valid and the weight was valid? Hopefully, one thing that you're noticing right now, I'm starting to take this program, and where we're calculating the BMI, it's already been broken up into 3 different routines. One called calculate BMI, one called validate height, one called validate weight. So I'm already breaking it up into routines. That's the way you typically program. All right. And it's called modularizing a program. Just the same way that maybe back, and I remember with me, it must have been around 4th grade, we learned how to write outlines. All right. And we broke things down into smaller components. That's really what we're doing right now. Now, just so you know, right now, this is called calculate BMI. All right. But I'm not calculating the BMI yet. Here I'm checking the height, and here I'm checking the weight. So I don't really want to call this calculate BMI. So down here, I'm just going to call this, I'm going to change it. It's kind of maybe a dumb name, but perform calculations. We can call it whatever we want, but I'm going to change it to perform calculations. Why am I doing that? I want to show you right now why I'm doing that. So this name is going to change from calculate BMI to, oops, try that again, to perform calculations. The reason that I'm doing it like that is if my height was valid and my weight was valid, now I want to call let BMI equal calculate the BMI. All right. Then after I've calculated the BMI, I want to put the result inside of the field that's called result. All right. So when I get done, and I'm going to write the calculate BMI in just a second. It's actually very short. But the next thing I want to do then is I want to say result dot value equal BMI. All right, I'm going to stop there. There's a little more we have to do, but before we do that, I want to write this routine, calculate the BMI. And you'll notice I'm first calling validate height, so there that is. Then I'm calling validate weight, and there that is. And now I'm about to come in here and put in my third routine, all right, which is calculate the BMI. Now, I'm going to write this twice, and there's a reason I'm doing this. But I'm going to say it here, const, calculate the BMI, all right? And I could do it just like this. It would work just fine. I'm going to type it in just like this. I'm going to say equal, no parameters. And I could type in here, so if I wanted to, I could say let, in fact, I've already got a variable up above that we called BMI, I believe. Did we create one way up here called BMI? We didn't. All right. That's okay. Let's create one in here. That'll be fine. So this is a local variable I'm creating right here. I can say let BMI equal, and I gave you the formula, but it looks like this. There's a lot of different ways to write this, but I'm just going to say weight times 703, just like that, and then divide that by height times height. All right. And I want to take that whole thing and I want to change it, put a 2 fixed in there because I want it to just be at 2 decimal places. The reason for that is if I don't, I can get a BMI, for example, of like 21.367852, which is kind of hard to read. Now, that's totally fine. And then I could do that and then say return BMI. So that's one way of doing it. And a lot of people code like that. Totally fine. But guess what? We have created a variable right there that is called BMI that we really don't need. What do I mean? What I mean is we could have just done this. And just said the return like that. And that would be totally fine. All right. Now, okay, that's 2 ways of doing it. But you know what? If you are using one of these arrow functions and you have just one line of code and you're returning something, you don't even need that. So we can do this. All right. Which means I don't need that either. Now, what that did, I'm trying to make that a little smaller, but kind of tough to do that. I can't move this over. It won't let me remove that. But notice it's all on one line now. Now, some people like that, and some people don't like that for the same reason. All right, the brevity of it. So let's take a look at what we've got right now. And again, let's go back to our bmi.html. And let's come in here and try a few. So 72 and 111, we now got a BMI. And notice, we're not telling it yet to clear, so we'll have to click that reset form. Let's try it again. That was an underweight person. That is an optimal weight person. That is an overweight person. And that is an obese person. So that's all working. Don't worry about the clearing the stuff. We'll get that in just a second. That's all working. All right. So the only thing that we have left to do is to figure out this status that goes in here and make sure everything clears when we're done. Let's do that, and then we'll take a break. All right. So we've come in here and up here. All right. Right there. We set a timer. All right. Where am I? Yeah. We set a timer. All right. We read in the value for our height. We read in the value for our weight. We validated that height thing. We validated that weight thing. All right. We called calculate the BMI. We set the thing that's holding the BMI. All right. So the only thing, again, that's left in here, there's 2 things. All right. 3 things, really. First thing is we want to set the BMI status, the underweight, overweight, etc. That's first thing. Then we want to set the picture. And then finally, we want to set that timer so this whole thing disappears after 5 seconds. So let's write those right now. So the next thing we want to do is we want to call set the BMI status. All right, that's another routine we haven't written yet. So let's come in there and write that one right now. We'll put it right under the one we just wrote. So const set the BMI status. All right, so that equals, nope, nothing passed in. All right, and there's different ways you can write this, but really the only one that makes any sense to me is to actually come in there and write this as a big if statement. So if the BMI, in fact, we're going to run into problems here. Hold on 1 second. We set BMI. Where did we do that? I just want to make sure that it's good. This is going to work. All right, we said here, let BMI equal this. Okay, that's fine. All right. And then we calculated, returned it. That's fine. All right, so if the BMI is less than that min optimal, and remember, I'm just going to put a comma in here. That means the BMI is less than 18.5. Well, you already know what that means. All right. Then we want to say the status is equal to underweight. All right. So that's grabbing and setting the stuff for the person who's underweight. Otherwise, okay. And I'm going to show you what I wrote before because I actually wrote too much code. I said else if BMI is greater than or equal to min optimal and let's just put it down here so we can see everything. BMI is less than min over. All right. If that's the case, we know that the status is optimal. So let's put that in and then we're going to change it. There's nothing wrong with what I just did. But guess what? That's already got to be true. It's got to be greater than or equal to because otherwise it would have been hidden here. So I actually wrote more code than I needed. I can change that to just this. All right. Otherwise, if it's less than min over, so again, what does that mean? That means that the BMI is greater than or equal to 18.5 and the BMI is less than 25. That's what that means. All right. So there's my first if, there's my else if. Let me grab this and copy it and paste. Now I can say if it's less than or equal to min obese. All right. And if that's the case, we know that it's greater than or equal to 25 and it's less than 30. All right. So then you're overweight. And the only thing that's left is obese. All right. Now that's not everything. All right, because we don't have to do it here, but now we know what the status is. So why don't we fill that in? Okay. So I'm going to come in here and say that's called status. That's the name of it on our form. Dot value equals the status. All right, let's save that. Let's run this again and see now if everything is actually in there. So 72, I won't have our picture yet, or it doesn't matter. All right, so that worked. We didn't get a status. Now, is there an error? I always run over to inspect then, and I go to console. It says BMI is not defined. All right. What does that mean? That means that where I define BMI, I defined it, where did we define it? We defined it right there. So we defined it inside of a routine called perform calculations, but it is not known in the routine called set BMI status. I could either make it global by bringing it up here, but let's not do that. Let's pass it. So I'm going to put BMI there, and then inside, well, not there, I'm sorry. I need it here where it says set the status. All right. So I'm going to pass it there. And then in my set status, I'm going to put it right there. Now let's see if it recognizes it. All right. So 72, 100, oops, 111. There it is with underweight. All right. Let's do it again. Now it's optimal weight. One more time. That's overweight. And finally, that's obese. Those are all working. All right. Two more things that I have to do. I have to put the picture in there, and then I have to call my timer and tell it that after 5 seconds, I want everything that's in there to disappear. All right. So I'll tell you what we'll do. It's not a huge routine, but it's big enough. It's what, about 25 or 30 lines that we have to write. So we're going to take a break first, but before we do, okay, before we do, let's see. Yeah, we won't need anything. Just to show you what we'll do right when we get back from the break then, is in here where we've been calling all this stuff. So this is our height was valid and our weight was valid. We calculated the BMI, that worked. We set on in the label, we set it there, that worked. We called set the BMI status, that worked. So I'm going to call two new routines, or one new routine. That's going to be called set the BMI picture. It won't need anything. All right. And then finally, I'm going to set my timer so that it's going to again be equal to set timeout. And I'm going to call that clear all after 5 seconds. So this set BMI picture, this is the thing that we have to write yet. And we will put that way down here right before our clear all. So I'm going to have const this. It will require no parameters. All right. And like I said, it's about 25 or 30 lines. All right. And it'll give me a chance to go over it in a little bit of depth and breadth of coverage after the break. All right. After we get done with that, we're jumping right into the next one. The next one is shorter than this one is. All right. Probably 30, 40 or more lines shorter. So I've got 9:04. Let's just come back, please, at 9:15. I should ask first, Chad, any questions on anything we've done?
No, I don't right now.
Okay, great. All right, I'll see you at 9:15 then. All right. It is 9:15, so I'm going to continue on. You'll notice if you look on the screen right now that I'm on page 211. The two problems that I asked you to do for the pretest are very similar to one another. This one's a little bit different because where you can have multiple errors like this, um, it shows you another way to basically create an error summary at the top of the page. So hint, hint, for the test tomorrow, you might want to just, some people dog ear this page by bending it back or whatever, or at least know that on page 211, they show you how to do it. So that's the picture. And then they show you the updated JavaScript for doing it. And the CSS are both shown here on page 211 as well. All right. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I'm going to write this last routine now, but I'm not going to do it the way they did it in the book. I'm going to use stuff they explained in the book, but I'm not going to do it the way they did it in the book. Sometimes it's good to go outside of the box a little bit. What I'm about to do, I'm going to do the equivalent of what they're doing in here. All right. I don't have a for loop. All right. Because I'm not preloading anything. But again, there's different ways that you can do this stuff. In fact, I'm not even concerned with preloading anything. All right. But I want to show you what I did, how I did it, etc. So we're in this set the BMI picture. First thing I'm going to do is you may or may not remember, but at the very top of the program, we had this variable in here that we called ELEM. All right. And it's time that I'm going to use it. So I'm going to come in here and say ELEM equals document dot create element image. I'm telling it right here, we're about to create an image. So we're going to create it. We're going to basically make sure, because this is where we're going to put it then. You may or may not remember this, but we've got we've got something in here that's called weight status picture. That's where we want this image to go. All right, but it just in case there was something in it before, we'll say dot value. In fact, we don't even want to say dot value. I think text content will work here. I think value, I think they both work, but I'm going to leave it like this. And I'm going to set it equal to nothing. I'm going to clear out whatever might be in there. All right. And then right now, I know what the status is for a person. I know it's one of four things. I know that it's underweight, optimal weight, overweight, or obese. I know it's got to be one of those things. So I'm going to set up a switch statement and I'm going to check for those. I could do this with an if also, if, else type of thing, but I'm going to use a switch. And I'm going to do a switch based on the status. All right. And first I'll check if the person was underweight. It doesn't matter the order in which you do these. To me, it just made sense to do them in the actual order we calculated them. So we're going to say here, LM, that's the element, dot set attribute. And what we're about to do is we're saying that the source for that image that we're creating, that ELEM, is going to be under the images folder. And it's going to be the image called underweight dot, and I don't remember if that's a JPEG or a PNG, so let me check. So these are the images. They're JPEGs. All right. So dot JPG. And since it's a case statement, we want a break at the bottom. All right. Now I'm going to cheat a little bit here. Hit enter. Try to hit enter. There we go. So we'll put another one in, and that will be optimal weight. And I don't remember when I set that. Optimal weight. Small w. It'll have to be, I have to make sure I spell it the same way and I use the same capitalization, unless I want to come in here and run, for example, if I want to come in and run the two uppercase or the two lowercase. All right. So this will be optimal weight. All right. Then I can do the next one, which is overweight. All right. And let me move this over. Working about that. All right. And then finally, let's do our last one, which was obese. And we'll set it to obese. Now, literally, that should cover 100% of the cases. It should always be one of those four things. But as the saying goes, just in case, we're going to put a default statement in here. All right, so that will be my default in just a second. Whoops, and I thought I put it in, but I didn't. So let me try it again. All right, I know I've got underweight in there twice. We're going to fix it right now. All right, and this will be case our default. All right, and I don't want that there. That's why I'm getting that error. All right, what do I want to put in there? Well, if you look at what I put in there for pictures, I've got one that just says image not available, and I called it NA.jpg. This should never get hit. It should never get hit, but it's better off to provide for the worst, hoping that it never ever happens, than not provide for it and have it happen. All right. So that should, unless I made errors in here, and I don't think I did, should have everything in there. So we put that in, and that was set the BMI picture, and then we set our timer. So let's see now if everything works. I mean, you've seen the way I typed this semester, so there's at least a chance I made some kind of an error. So 72. In fact, let me tell you, I'm going to make this 100%, 110. It's smaller, but I want the picture to all show there. So 72 and 111. Okay, no picture. That's okay. Let's see if we can figure out why. Inspect, go to console, type error. Create element ... is not a function. So something I put into line 167 right there, it doesn't like. And actually, it's not there. That's where it discovered the error, but it's up here someplace. So let's see if we can figure that out. I had run this before, as you'd probably guess, and it worked. So I probably typed something in incorrectly. It's actually correct. Might be complaining about this too. I don't know. Let's see where I used that before. Might want that. Not that. Not sure what it's complaining about, to be honest with it. Let's see if it's this line. I'm going to comment that out, see if I get the same error. This is interesting because it worked when I ran it before, but that's okay. That's still working, but again, I'm not getting a picture. So you go down to inspect, and we go to console. Yep. Oh, set timeout. Oh, that isn't good. Instead of set timeout, in line 93, it says. Yeah, that would probably help. Set timeout. Okay. Let's try it again. Still not getting a picture. But it's telling me that everything is cool. Let me take that line that I commented out because I thought it was possibly erroneous, and let me uncomment it right here. That shouldn't right there be enough to change anything, though. Oh, I know what it is. Down at the very bottom here, I never told it to display. All right. Now I'm going to try this in two ways because I want to show you two different ways of doing this. First way is I'm going to put in my $sign. All right. My dog is going nuts for some reason. In fact, I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to type in document.getElement by ID. All right. That was the reason. There was not an error there. It just I wasn't telling it to actually show on the screen. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to see if I can rewrite this in just a minute. And I apologize for that. Apologize for the dog, period. So 72 and 111, still not getting a picture. Oh, it is saying create element. It doesn't like, it says it's not a function. Now it's flagging it here, but it's telling me it doesn't like this. I'm trying to figure that. Go
I've
ahead.
been following along and I still had wait status picture that line 167 commented out and mine's working now.
All right, then we'll do that. Thank you. And I think the reason that it's complaining, the reason I'm getting that error right there is I am referring to it incorrectly. In other words, it probably should be wait next sibling or something like that. All right. But I'll take you at your word there and I'll comment that out. Right? And then let's try it again. All right. So 72, 111. There's my underweight person and it's going to refresh. Okay. 72. Oops. And let's make it about 177. That's an optimal weight person. 72 and 200. That is an overweight person. And finally, 72 and 333, and that is an obese person. So all of them are working. There's only one thing I don't like right now about the program. I'm going to just click right here, okay? And I'm going to refresh. Notice that when the program starts, the mouse isn't in here, all right? And I think it should be. That's a very simple fix, and hopefully you all know what that is by now. But all I have to do is come down into here into my JavaScript file. And at the very beginning here, these where I'm setting my event handlers. And I just have to say $height dot focus. That should fix it. Let's see if it does. All right. So I'm going to come in here. Notice it's already here. So I'm going to click right there. So I've clicked off of it. So there it is. And I'm going to refresh. And now it's back where it should be. All right. So thank you for that. Those words of wisdom. Grant, any questions on anything we've done in here?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Good. All right. Then let's do the other one. So the other one is our guessing game. All right. So that's this one. Make it a little bigger. And very hard for me to get expert when you need 5 or less. It's more or less a joke when I get that. But I'm usually average, which is 6 to 10. All right. And there's also novice, which is more than 10. All right. But we're going to do a lot, and I mean a lot, of the very same thing that we have been doing. All right. So let's get in here and work on that one now. We close a couple of these. I got lots of stuff open here. All right. So let's bring up, so we now have this, this one, the calculate. Let's bring up the game. Okay. Get back into here. And I'm going to close calculate, and I'm going to close the BMI HTML. I'm going to leave that one up, and I'm going to bring up the game. Those are my images, the game.js. Okay. Again, you can see all the stuff that's here. I'm not going to read those to you. You've got all of those comments. All right. So let's do just as we did before. We've done our alias, our use strict and our alias. So let's declare and initialize our program constants. All right, we'll do that. And I've got less than I had last time. Then when we get done, we will declare and initialize our program variables. All right, so let's start here. So our minimum guess that we're going to allow is 1. Our maximum guess that we're going to allow is 100. I'm going to put NNG, which looks a little weird, but it stands for non-numeric guess. Have another one that's going to be called GOOR, which is going to be for guess out of range. Another one. So we can say the guess of 50, and we'll put it here, was too high. Another one with WTL. So we can say like the guess of 50 was too low. And finally, a last one called WC, which will say like the guess of 50 was correct. All right. You didn't have to put in those. All right. But to me, they just kind of made sense to put that stuff in there. All right. So then here, we're going to have a variable that's going to hold our random number. I just called it random. Again, we could call it whatever we wanted. Set it equal to 0. Let guess, and that's going to be our current guess. I'm going to set that equal to 0. Our total number of guesses is going to be equal to 0. Here's that is valid thing again. We'll set that equal to true. And like we did before, we're going to have the status, and that'll be equal to the empty string. And then again, we're going to use that ELEM like we used, and that'll also be equal to the empty string. All right. So do it the same way that I did the other one, and that is I'm going to jump down to the bottom of the page. All right, so I'm going to hit enter quite a few times here, and I'm going to come down here and basically add all of my event listeners. All right. So this is where, again, I put in, whoops, my document. For our DOM content loaded. Again, no parameters. And there's 3 buttons here. A clear button to clear the form, a button to make the guess, and a button to create a new game. All right, the clear form and the new game are very similar to one another, as you'll see in just a moment. And after we set up those 3, all right, after we set up those 3, we're going to set the focus. Now, I'm going to write this a little different, and the reason I am is not to confuse you, but I showed you in the last one way that you can write this, but another way that you oftentimes see it is like this. Not like that. All right, so what we did last time was we came in here and we said click, and then we put a comma, and then we called our routine, which is totally fine. And quite often it's done that way. Sometimes people put the event in there just in case you need it. All right, and that's more of an advanced topic, but I just wanted to show this to you. And then you call clear the form like this. It's very similar to what we just wrote, not identical, but very similar. And I'm only showing it to you, like I said, because people, people do things in different ways. And what you're going to find is if you get a job as a programmer, there's at least a chance you are going to have to do some maintenance work, which means cleaning up something someone else wrote. And you may not like the way that they wrote it. All right. And I mean, my first job was a maintenance job when I was programming. And I said to my boss, there were like, I don't know, a handful of errors in this code. And he asked me to fix them. And I did. And I'm not making this up because the code I was working on was part of a bigger piece of code that had 700 warnings in it, not errors, warnings. And I said, do you want me to fix these warnings? And his first question was, why? And I said, well, because warnings can become errors. He said, when they become errors, we'll worry about them. All right, but I think he was probably afraid because here I am, this new programmer, and maybe I showed chutzpah, I don't know. But I wasn't trying to say that what the person before did was wrong, but I thought I could probably write it a little better. So he didn't agree, evidently, and that was okay. So our first button is literally called, it's got an ID of clear form. The second button has got an ID of make guess. And the last one will have one of new game. All right. So you see it's a little bit different as far as the way that it's written. Since we're passing in you're using that event, we're telling it when the event happens, then we are telling it to call this. So there we do use the parens. Finally, I want to make sure that when the game starts, that the focus is on me where I put the guess. Now, that's the only thing I can check so far because I haven't written the other stuff. But I should be able to come in here. Hopefully I can. We'll see. And run this and see if when it starts to run, notice where my cursor is. So that's good. So this will be the routine that's going to be called clear. This one I'm going to write first, clear the form. All right. This one will be examine guess. And this one will be start new game. And again, the order in which I do these is 100% up to me. All right. Now, the easiest one to write, in my opinion, is clear form. And the second easiest is new game. So I'm going to do those two first. All right. Just so you know. All right. Whoops. So right up above, basically, where I just was. Okay. I'm going to move up. And first I'll do this one. And I'm going to write the clear form. Now, I know a lot of this, I mean, a lot of coding is repetition. All right. So by now, what I'm showing you hopefully will just make sense. But what do I want to have happen here? Well, I want to clear this. I want to set that back to an asterisk. So clear and set, clear this, clear this. So that's four things. And then I want to set the focus back to here. Oh, I don't want to come in and remove the clear, 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 clear. So let's write this.
Professor, I don't know if you can hear me, but I've completely lost you. I can't see anything moving on the screen anymore or hear you.
All right, let's double check.
I just heard you again. I had lost you for about a minute there.
Did you lose?
I think I'm losing you again.
Connection, and it says it's fine. Can you hear me now?
I just heard you again, yeah.
That stuff. Did I lose you again?
It's coming in and out. Every time you ask if you're there, it goes out right after.
Well, let's look on here. No, can't. Says you're up to date.
All right, it seems a bit better for the moment.
Oh, all right. So you can hear me. Can you? Grant, are you there?
I just heard that. I
All right.
haven't heard you for a while though.
Tell you what I'm going to do. All right. And if I cut out, sorry. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the tape and I'm going to bring the tape up again. Oh, if I do that, you're going to lose me though. Oh my goodness. All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. We're going to take 5 minutes to save this one. All right. And it'll take 5 or 10 minutes to save this one. Then I'm going to bring it back up again. That makes sense?
Yes. All right.
All right. So let's just take a break. Well, in fact, we'll take a break till 10 because that should give me enough time to have this and have it be